Ah, Tormy.
Tormy's here.
Was that you were thinking about like the last 8 minutes because you're a little bit late? You're like, ooh, what should my name be? So you're just sitting there figuring it out?
Yeah, I was just sitting there figuring out my name. I'm like,
Ah.
what haven't I done before?
Yeah, you know what you haven't done yet? Kami.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Kami Tommy.
Hello, listeners. Here with Tom Blass after a lengthy hiatus. How you doing, buddy? How was your vacation with your dad, your grandpa, your uncle?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a long one, but it was a nice vacation. You know, it's a good time. I recommend everybody go out and spend some time with the old dad and the old grandpa.
I'm sure you definitely deserved it because a vacation is something that we deserve after working our asses off for quite some time. And being that today is Labor Day, well, I guess Labor Day is Monday, right? Labor Day is tomorrow, or is Labor Day technically today? Sunday.
Labor Day's technically Monday.
Okay. Well, it's Labor Day weekend. And Labor Day is a day for people in the working community to be recognized. I believe Labor Day, if you go back in time, Tom, it's about the 8-hour workday. Is that what it was? Kind of like where workers kind of fought to not be actual slaves to their job, so to say?
I think there's two ways to look at it. The textbook way of seeing it, where it was a workers' move celebrating their own labor and just the workforce in general. But you could also look at it a little more cynically and say that it's sort of just the ruling class or the managerial class tossing some crumbs into the crowd, like, oh yeah, there you go, you guys get a holiday. Look at all your hard work.
It's also great when an employer gives you vacation time, which you were lucky enough to take during the summer. I think a vacation is what everyone needed this year. I know we have COVID going on, but a vacation is okay. And I think when you have an employer that is happy to provide you that vacation, that is what Labor Day is all about, because typically everyone has Monday, sometimes they have Friday and Monday off. So it's a worker appreciation holiday weekend.
That's fair. Yeah. I can always get behind, regardless of the sort of nature of it. I can usually get behind a nice 3-day weekend. Nothing wrong with that.
And I think peaceful vacations are really what we need when there is work involved you're working year round. I think peaceful vacations like fishing, like you did, that's a type of relaxing vacation. I think when people go to Europe and travel all along the country, taking trains, going through museums and stuff like that, to me, that's not a vacation. That's an educational escape. Or even hiking. I don't think hiking is like a relaxing type of vacation. It's more like a fitness getaway. So I think
disagree.
You disagree?
I think you could take leisurely hikes. Not every hike has to be like the one place in Maine where I went. There was like at one point the trail was just a sheer like rock wall, and there was like these metal rods sticking out of the rock that you had to climb on. Like, not every hike is like that, although I thought that was fun. Yeah, I mean, so sometimes some of these hikes are pretty easygoing. And
I do think, though, there's like different types of getaways and vacations, and I think that everyone deserves separate types of vacations where you have like a relaxing, just get like some mental clarity, like fishing. You had a relaxing vacation. Now, granted, you went with family, so who knows how mentally good that was, because I can tell you the last time I went on a family vacation, it's, do you have everything? Are you all packed? So you're super stressed before you leave.
No, it was it was pretty relaxing. I had a good time. And fishing tends to be a pretty passive activity, so you can just sit around. It's not very demanding. So that's what I liked. I've hit the age where like a vacation now, a vacation at one point to me was something that was like exciting, where it's like, ooh, I'm going to a new place and I'm going to do this. And now I've hit once I don't know if it happened when I hit 30 or once I passed into the threshold of my 30s, but I'm like, Jesus, nice vacation to me now is just one where I could just sit on my ass and not do much.
Dude, those are the best. I'm looking forward to one of those come closer to the holiday season when my business kind of slows down a little bit. I wonder if it even is going to slow down. I have a feeling like last year, this real estate market's just going to continue going until it just implodes.
It really might. At this point, who knows? The regular sort of cyclical nature of the market's been so totally thrown off. Who knows where it's going to land?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where everyone thought that the buying market is during the summertime, and we just had a conference call, and it's like, all right, get ready for, the end. Everything is going to start slowing down a little bit. And yesterday, this whole week, I think I got 5 purchases that came in, and it's like, nope, we're not slowing down. This is just going to be what it is. The whole mentality of people are only buying during the summertime and listing during the summer. They're going to list and buy as comps come in. So if comparables are closing in August, people are going to see the opportunity to list in the fall and the winter because they have those higher comps that are closing in the summer. So I think the winter is going to continue staying busy, and maybe I get a couple of days here and there, but there's never going to be like a week off, which I guess kind of sucks. I do want like a week where I can literally turn my phone off and not have to worry about anything. But if it's off, there's that small possibility that huge purchase comes in and got to take it.
Yep, you'll miss the big deal.
Big deal. Remember when we used to play Monopoly and we used to make deals, and Scotty and you used to get so pissed off?
Yeah, because you make scumbag deals.
I'm in the real estate industry.
We should have known we were outclassed.
Listeners, we kind of did something a little different. We released part 2 of the box. Tom and I were very excited to release our first 2-parter, but ultimately we decided to put the box part 1 in the box and not release it. However, we did decide to release part 2 last week because it was not necessary to put in the box. So you probably have a little bit of an understanding of what the box actually is. So what we did with this episode is we went back in time, we re-recorded this episode, and this is the box part 1. The only unfortunate thing with going back in time is we brought the Taliban back with us during our hiatus.
Yeah. What can I say? They hitched a ride when we weren't looking,
Can I tell you that the whole Taliban thing that happened while we were kind of away was so fast. I didn't read or hear anything about it, and then literally it's just Taliban took over.
Yeah. I heard the Taliban is poised to recapture Afghanistan and retake Afghanistan, and it was like, oh, that's vaguely alarming. But the way it was phrased, it's kind of like, you think, I'm sure it's just clickbait or whatever. And next thing I know, these guys are giving press conferences, and you've got all the media there, and they're like, so how does this work now? And the guys are like, well, these are these are the stipulations of our government. And it's like, what the fuck? That was fast.
It was really fast. And I actually have a stupid question for you. And call me stupid. I don't really care. But like they say, there is no stupid question. You were in the Army Reserves. You obviously drove a Humvee, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you ever get into an Apache or no?
An Apache, no. The only thing I ever got in was a Chinook, which is the helicopter with the 2 blades.
How about a tank? Have you ever gotten in a tank?
No.
So maybe you'll still know this, though. Those items, we'll call it an Apache. You said a Chinook, a Humvee, other Army vehicles or Marine vehicles, and tanks. Do they require a key to start?
Funny enough, a Humvee does not. Well, yes and no. So you can start and drive a Humvee without a key. It's just got a switch that you flip, and then you got to wait for it to get ready, and then you can just start it. But typically what happens is there's usually a cable around the steering wheel that you have to unlock, but it's not part of the Humvee. So I guess theoretically, if you had something that was capable of cutting that cable, you could drive off with one. Yeah. You
mean to tell me that Humvees, literally you see one there, you're roaming, let's just say you got trapped in the desert and there's a random Humvee there that is just shit, look, I can take this and drive it. You can literally just hop in and drive it away.
Yep.
And it doesn't require a key.
Does not require a key.
That's pretty fucking nuts. Okay.
It also has no parking gear on the transmission. You gotta put it in neutral and deploy the emergency brake. That's how you park it.
Now, how about the helicopters and the tanks? Do those require keys at all, or are they kind of like? And you don't have to put in a code on a Humvee. It's literally just a switch up, turns on, you're good to go.
Yep, pretty much. As far as I would like to say that a tank would require a key, but I actually don't know if it does. Let's find out, because I don't know the answer.
While you are finding out, though, it brings up a pretty good thing, because remember, it's one of those things where the Taliban got all this shit that was left behind. And I was thinking to myself, where if these things required keys, well, who the fuck had the keys?
Yeah. Well,
right?
That's just it, right? They should be secured somehow.
Right?
Now,
the other thing is, like, my car literally it tracks everything. You could turn me off probably while I'm driving. So you mean to say, with all the technology that we have, the U.S. government can't just click something and like kind of just like a
kill switch?
I kept going because I couldn't say the word. Yeah, like a kill switch that just burns up a chip and then it can't turn on. Or even like it like self-sabotaging, where like if you do it, it kind of like not explodes, but it almost breaks the interior of the item, so it's just a shell.
Yeah, you would think that, I guess. I mean, I think the idea with a lot of at least like the armored vehicles and the Humvees and the up armored Humvees and the tanks and whatnot. Tanks don't require keys. I just discovered they start the same way the Humvee does. I think the idea with a lot of them is that the less technology is in them, the less things there are to break. So I think they look at it as more of like if there were anything complicated in there as far as like an immobilizer or something like that, it's a liability because it's something that could go wrong during the mission. And then obviously if it fails when you're like really trying to use it and it stops the vehicle, then that could actually like get people killed.
I see. But, so really it's with less technology, the item is built to last then, especially in a vehicular sense.
Yes. But that said, there are things that I use, and I'm sure, I didn't get the cream of the crop in terms of, military equipment. But like, for example, there was a type of computer system that we were using at one point that does have, it's supposed to be like the thing that's in like your main operating center, right? Your tactical operations center. It's supposed to be the computer system that sort of gives all the higher ups a view of everything that's kind of going on in the battlefield, and points of interest, points where events have occurred and things like that. And that has a button where if everything gets overrun, you can press it and it just totally like wipes the computer completely clean. There's no data left on it. And funny enough, when I was training on that in Georgia in my AIT, which is the thing you go to after basic training, one of the guys thought that the ones that were in the classroom weren't real, and he pressed that button and it destroyed it. And he was on the hook for like $4,400 or something, whatever the fuck the computer system cost. They just straight up charged him for it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, there should have been some sort of action plan in place, just as, worst case scenario type of measure where these things should have been secured somehow, and not just like, oh, well, as long as there's an armed guard, at the front of the motor pool, then nobody can take them. Because what happens when something like this happens? There's a mass evacuation. Everybody just leaves. Then you're telling me that was it? Like, oh, well, yeah, we've got nothing to stop them now. Like, you couldn't have at least like, I don't know, taken the batteries out of them or something. Like, well, come on.
I guess the U.S. government put that in the box so that the media is only reporting the idea that they were just left there without any reason why. Clearly, they thought leaving that there was going to be okay, and this were never going to happen. It's weird, though, because it seems that it was so easy after we left that people who were against troops being there in the beginning were now basically arguing, why did we leave?
So there's a logical fallacy called a false dichotomy. And a false dichotomy is when something is presented as an either or thing, and it's not. The two things aren't mutually exclusive, but they're presented as being so. So I think that is something that the media is doing, just in terms of just, the usual sort of partisan politics that the media promotes, where they try and get people riled up. I think it makes people more reactionary, but realistically, it is totally feasible to have been against troops being there and saying that we should pull them out and thinking that this was not the right way to do it. That is a completely logical stance to have, and that those two things don't contradict each other. They don't have to necessarily contradict each other.
Do you think, though, this is a way to get the Democrats to support troops back to Afghanistan and starting a war again? Because we basically left and now it's in utter complete chaos, and we never should have left in the first case. So now you can get Democrats on board with the Republicans and it'll be a bipartisan agreement to go back there again?
Oh, boy. I hope not.
But in all honesty, because it seems like there are Democrats that are very against the fact that we left now, given the state that it's in. So if there's conversation on going back and putting troops back in Afghanistan and starting this whole thing all over, don't you think that it's more or less going to be more bipartisan than it would be where Republicans want to go and Democrats don't want to go? Do you think we're going to have we started something there, now we got to finish it and clean it up? We never should have left in the first place. It's kind of like the mentality in 2004 when Bush became president the second time, where it's like, well, he started it, we might as well let him finish it. Dumbest fucking logic ever.
Right. And that's the thing, is that if we were to try and repeat that, it would not work the same way, because we've already seen what happens when we do that. It's not like a plan just kind of materializes out of the ether and then all of a sudden it all makes sense. Like, no, we spent 20 years there, and then we gave Afghanistan an Irish goodbye, and it went as disastrously as everybody was kind of predicting that it would. So I think if it were to happen again, in terms of you talk about like a bipartisan promotion of heading back to Afghanistan, I think this time around there's going to be a lot less troops on the ground. I mean, you got to remember, in 2004, drone technology wasn't nearly what it is now. So I wonder if heading back to Afghanistan would involve a significant number of even boots on the ground at this point. I don't think it would. I don't think there's going to be people getting sent over to Afghanistan like there were the first time around.
Yeah, it's crazy times. We made a big mistake. We should never went back in time.
Yeah, no, no, we shouldn't have. And that's just it.
It's crazy because this talk is now having a lot of people calling for Biden's resignation. And listen, I am one to admit where I think the experiment we should have tried this time around is Bernie Sanders. I think, and listen, I was very against it in 2016, and I will admit this time around, I think we should have gone with the Bernie Sanders experiment and not the Biden experiment, and everyone's now calling for Biden's resignation. I think everyone's forgetting what the domino effect of what that means. And this is going to be everyone's little reminder. If Biden resigns, Kamala Harris becomes president and Nancy Pelosi becomes vice president at this point in time. And she was not even in the top 5, right? When we got to it. And she just automatically becomes president, which to me is worse.
Yeah.
So I think it's better to just deal with it until 2024 and see where that brings us, because now Bernie's too old. So he can't do it. Can't do it.
No, Bernie. Yeah, at this point, Bernie's done. I thought it was kind of depressing that Bernie was like the popular candidate, in terms of just getting people involved in supporting his campaign. I mean, like him or not, he was the popular Democratic candidate, and he got screwed over by the Democratic, the establishment Democrats, twice, 2 separate times.
That's something that's in my box is Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders is in your box.
Bernie Sanders in my box. I wish he was the president right now, because I would have liked to have seen how that experiment went. We saw how the Trump experiment went. Okay. And now we got Bernie Sanders. At least those are two huge outliers in our, political world. And it would have been, I guess, an interesting thing to see. Biden's not very interesting. Again, it's like every time I see him, I'm like, he looks like an old dog that's about to get put to sleep. And it's just sad. And like, that's our country. I mean, at least people are like not looking at us anymore and be like, America's full of assholes. Now we get the pity. I'd rather people look at us like a bunch of assholes than feel bad for us. Because we have Biden. I mean, personally, I'd rather Trump over Biden, put that in the box, but I would have preferred to have Sanders for 2020 just to see how it went. I mean, like how it would have been an interesting thing to have kind of seen,
It would, yeah, I agree. I think it would have, again, like Sanders or not, I think him getting the presidency with the sort of bold ideas that he's got, the untested ideas that he's got about how things should work. I think it would have at least shown that like we're ready for change, right? And then getting Joe Biden in office was literally like, okay, look, we need a break from things that are different. Like we got to catch our breath. And it's like, man, that sucks.
as much as people did dislike Trump, he was a step forward in showing the push against establishment. And literally Biden coming in was going back to the past. Biden came in and now the Taliban, we're literally going back. We went back to 2000.
We did. Yeah.
Biden becoming president. We literally, because again, people don't like Trump. However, it was a huge step forward in the people can pick someone who has no real political ties. And Bernie would have been a step forward. Like, listen, Trump was an outlier and then Bernie was an outlier.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's I don't necessarily think that Trump was the best candidate, but at least he was indicative of like a change. The people wanted something different. And now you could argue that he was better or worse than what came before him. But suffice it to say, like, it showed that your vote actually matters. And, you can, if enough people get together and decide that a change is necessary, the American public can actually really does have an influence on the elections. So that's that's pretty interesting. Although, did Trump win the popular vote? I
don't think so. I think Hillary won the popular vote, but that I'm pretty sure like a bunch of dead people voted though.
Yeah, I saw something on Afghanistan, and somebody in the comments was like, "Oh boy, all these Biden voters are rolling over in their graves." Oh, God.
So, anywho, listeners, we started talking about the Taliban. We started talking about politics and stuff like that. And Tom and I do have differing views, which him and I can talk and not argue with each other about politics. Politics are one of the biggest things that can cause dysfunction in relationships, especially in today's times. And that is why the creation of the box in all relationships, whether you be family, significant others, friends, acquaintances, and even enemies, the box is one of the most crucial, imaginative items that you can have with each other. And some people just simply can't talk about politics. Again, I don't hate Trump. I like him more than I hate him. And if that conversation does come about with certain people, it turns into an argument. And therefore, I put that in the box.
Right. And me, on the other hand, I hated Trump from day one. And I was loath to associate myself with a lot of the other people who hated him at the time in 2016. And it did boil down to what I talked about before, a false dichotomy where it was like, you're either all the way Trump or you're either all the way Clinton, and there's no in between. It's like, well, no, I can hate them both. Like, I hate both of these people. So, but that said, so I feel totally different about that. However, you know what? Me and Chris are still friends at the end of the day because we can take opinions like that and just put them in a box.
Another topic that has now come into play where I do think it needs to go in the box is the vaccine. So it's obviously known that there are a lot of people who are getting vaccinated, but there are also a large amount of people who are not getting vaccinated. And it's now turned into vicious arguments with name calling and other things. And in that sense, the vaccine is something that causes a lot of disagreement. And if someone is adamant about not getting vaccinated, that is their choice. And if somebody is adamant about getting vaccinated, that is their choice. There is no sense in arguing about it. If you don't feel comfortable around unvaccinated people, simply just say you don't feel comfortable being around them and move on. Don't turn it into an argument. There's no sense in arguing about it. People have their opinions, and you're not going to change their mind. And if that is something that goes into the box. Now, there are people out there who do not want to be associated with people who are not vaccinated. That is their choice. But you can't argue with someone who made that choice. It's
right,
on them.
At the end of the day, every individual has the liberty of making that decision, like it or not. So it is one of those things that you can't, you can only use it as a barometer by which to conduct yourself. You can't force your choice or your decision on anybody else.
And discussions are good. People can have discussions, and we're not trying to say don't have the discussion with someone, but once you notice that it's a heated topic where there's arguing and name calling, that's when you have to know when to stop. I feel like today's day and age, it's not just a discussion anymore. There's anger there. And then once there's anger, that's where you need to realize, you know what? We're either family, we're friends, most of the time it's with family and friends. You just gotta realize that's not a conversation to have. And if it's a third party, association with somebody who just happens to be part of the crew, be like, listen, I don't know you. It is, you're there, I'm here. Let's just not talk about it. Or we can just not, we don't have to coexist. Like you be one place, I be the other. You don't need to argue. I think arguing is what is kind of tearing this country apart at this point.
Well, it's funny. I want to say something about that. So I was listening to this podcast called It Could Happen Here. And it's a podcast about the factors that could be present today that might eventually spark the next American Civil War, right? And it kind of delves into all these sort of different aspects of society and these different hotbeds of activity where people might actually be encouraged to incite violence against the government, whatever. But one of the things they talk about in one of the episodes was the rhetoric used between social advocacy groups. You've got all these different groups that are, trying to take each other down. And one of the things that they do, which has been something that historically has never, ever resulted in anything other than, violence in the streets, is when they talk about opposing sides, they've reached a point where they are trying to dehumanize them. So what they're trying to do is when person from Group A is having a rally for all the Group A people, and they're trying to vilify the people in Group B, they'll use words and they'll use language that deliberately makes the people in Group A view the people in Group B not as people. They're these, these things that look like people, but on the inside, they have this horrible conflicting ideology. And, they're the only thing you can do with them is destroy them. And I mean, there's plenty of historical precedent out there that shows that sort of conversation is no good. It leads to atrocities like genocide etc. When the discussion between people gets so contentious and so emotional that it starts to make people feel this moral superiority where they think that the other party is inhuman, it's a very, very bad direction to head in.
So the media tried to divide the country through the race war, sex, sexual orientation, and really just the common divide of Republican Democrat politics. And really, it wasn't divided in like a sense where we're hating each other, but this vaccine thing is what really is able to separate people and really cut people in half and divide them, especially in some of these cities where you can't go in if you're not vaccinated now. So it is a thing where you can't go in a restaurant or a cafe indoor without being vaccinated. And that's literally segregation. Right?
Look. All right. So I'm not saying your opinion is right or wrong. My counterpoint is, or rather my sort of rebuttal to that is that I do agree that the vaccine, the language surrounding the vaccine and the arguments for the vaccine and the arguments against the vaccine and just the general sort of debate between it is the disagreement there is getting more contentious, and it is definitely absolutely getting to a point where either side is actively trying to dehumanize the other side. And I think with enough division in this country, that could be a powder keg down the road. So I do agree that is a bad thing. However, segregation is tough, right? I mean, like, because it's tough to say that it's segregation.
It's a strong word because of how it's been used in the past. But really, the definition of segregation as a noun is the action or state of setting someone or something apart from other people or things or being set apart.
And but by that logic, the swastika was a Chinese symbol for luck. I mean, and you say, "Oh, I got a Chinese symbol for luck here," but like, no, like everybody associates it with something else that's far different. So I don't think segregation is a word, because think about it this way, right? If you're somebody who supports free markets, right, then you should be behind the idea that a business, for example, can make rules regarding who can't come into their establishment within reason. Of course, obviously, you don't want a business to be able to discriminate against people for things over which they have no control. However, you have a choice to get the vaccine or not. And so since the choice is in your hands whether or not to get the vaccine, the choice should also be in the hands of the business to allow you to come in or to not, to serve vaccinated and unvaccinated people, or to only serve one or the other. Right?
Let me ask you a question, though. How do you think it goes if there's a restaurant that opens and they only want to serve unvaccinated people? And if you're vaccinated, we don't want your kind in here.
Okay. I mean, while I would not benefit from that because I am a vaccinated person, I can't argue with that. It's one of those things. Sometimes being consistent means that something is going to happen that you disagree with, but fundamentally the principles that lead you to that conclusion, you could disagree with the merits of the idea, but you can't disagree with the option to have the idea if the path to getting it is consistent. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but also, hey, if a restaurant can only serve vaccinated people and tell unvaccinated people to fuck off, why shouldn't a restaurant where, run by people who are unvaccinated only serve unvaccinated people and tell vaccinated people to fuck off?
Well, that's also the same reason why now they have a gay parade, but you can't have a straight parade.
Yeah. And while we're at it, why isn't there a White History Month? Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Tom, get canceled.
Yeah, right. But no, hear me out for a second though. If the restaurants are doing it because they're afraid that come wintertime they're going to be shut down again, they are implementing this based off fear that the government can just tell them to close their doors again. And that's pretty scary, where they feel forced to mandate people being vaccinated in order to go into their establishment, with the fear that come time, if they don't, they're going to be told they have to shut their doors or get fined.
Sure.
So there is a very strange thing, in my opinion. And again, I don't have listen, I speak Chris because it's opinion based, but I find that very scary. I find it scary that some of these restaurants who probably wouldn't want to have that on their door, but they're doing it simply for the fact that they're afraid the government is going to say, well, guess what, restaurants, you didn't mandate this, so now you're shut down. You can't make a living. So I think there's a lot of fear coming into this country, and a lot of people are doing things based on the fear that the government is going to start forcing them to do certain things.
And I agree with that, because I think a lot of these restaurants are going to be extra willing to comply, having seen what the lockdowns did to them last time. A lot of these restaurants, if they did make it, which a lot of them did not, but the ones that did probably couldn't weather it again. So I do think that I don't think that the economy in this country, as it stands right now, could handle another lockdown. That would be disastrous. I think that would be probably the most disastrous thing to happen so far from coronavirus and everything to the economy in this country. So
do you actually think, though, we would do another lockdown? And if we did, I wonder how many people and businesses would comply with it this time around. I personally think that majority of the people who would go for the shutdown are on the liberal-leaning Democrat side. The people that would enforce it, okay, they're the police state, where they're leaning now more towards the conservatives and the Republicans. And you're going to tell the police to enforce a lockdown where most of them probably don't agree with the liberal side of things. We're in a very weird spot, dude. We really are on the verge of like some real crazy shit happening.
I mean, yeah, dude, it's got to be real. Like the one thing you brought up there that really I wrestle all the time with this in my head, and I have no idea what I would do. But like you talk about the cops, right? The cops would be willing to enforce it or not, and you could pretty soundly make an argument for either side, right? Because the one thing, if I were a cop, right, the one thing I would never, ever want to have to think about is that if I did something terrible and I was just following orders, right? Because obviously we know what happens when people do that. That's, all the Nazi soldiers would say, oh, I was just following orders, and meanwhile they're doing unspeakably terrible things. So when it comes to being any kind of member of like law enforcement or the military or anything like that, nobody wants to think to themselves like, oh, well, I was just following orders. And that's the only like absolution they get from having done what they did. So nobody wants to be on the wrong side of history. And there, as of right now, there's no right side of it, because on one hand, the government might be doing this for everybody's safety, or maybe they have some, more diabolical intent behind it. And you don't know, maybe it could be 50-50. If it is both of those things in equal measure, is it good or bad? I mean, it could be, you could argue that it's a control device. It's a measure of control to see how compliant the population is at large. And I don't think that's untrue, but also I mean, if the government is doing it for people's safety, does that outweigh, the sort of inherent desire as a free person with free will to just not comply with what the government's asking? I mean, like these are fair questions to which I have no answer, but I can barely wrestle the idea as just an average citizen, but as an enforcer of the law, I wouldn't know what the fuck I was doing right now. I'd wake up every day.
I do think it is a control thing. And I know I get a lot of, shut up, that it's not true, but you already see it, the working class slightly rising up against their corporation employers, right? They're wanting more money to work. And so there is this sort of rise up of the people, and they're starting with corporations for one. What's next? Government, where you realize that, wow, these people are really fucking us over and things need to change. They don't want it to get to that point where there's enough people that realize that our government is corrupt. Dude, it is. But when there's enough people that actually understand that, then it's a problem. So this whole thing is to see how much control they do have. And the way to control everyone is by scaring them with money and that you're not going to be able to make a living.
Yeah. And I do think a lot of these corporations right now are just playing the waiting game. I think they know that eventually people are going to need jobs. People aren't going to have the unemployment. I mean, are people even getting unemployment anymore? Is that still going on?
I think it stops this month. Which that's an argument that I don't think should go into the box, is the whole unemployment thing. I think everyone bitching and complaining about people not wanting to work and that whole unemployment thing is pay more fucking money. That's not something that goes into the box. There's more money to be made. The government was helping enough for people I didn't get a single unemployment check. I didn't get any of that. So I am on the side of the people who did get laid off and they got more money, and they're now fighting for more money from their employer, as they should. Free money should not be more than what you go to work for.
Yeah, I think that's an immense cop out when people say, "Oh, well, Biden doesn't want people to work."
I mean, let's do some math for a second. So the minimum wage in New York City, I believe, is, hold on, let's look. What is New York City minimum wage? It is currently $15 an hour. Okay. $15 an hour. So 15 times 40 is $600. Okay. So $600 a week times 52. That's $31,200. Okay. Divide that by 12. That is a monthly income of $2,600 before taxes. $2,600 a month. Dude, $2,600 a month is not that much money. And you have to assume you're going to be taxed, right? You're stuck paying taxes on $2,600. So let's say you get on the very liberal side of it, 90% of that. That's $2,340. Now, you know what sucks when you're in New York City? You have to pay for a fucking subway to get places. Subway costs you probably $2 a ride, right? So think about it. You need to ride the subway to work and the subway back. So now that's $4 a day. Okay. $4 a day times 5 is $20 a week. So, and remember, you don't get to write that off. So now you're now paying 20 times 4, $80 a month. You have rent. Say you're living with a bunch of people. You got $800 to live in like probably a 12 by 12 box. So you have $800 there, which leaves you $2,340 minus 800 minus $80. That leaves you with $1,460. I'm sure the food in New York City costs more. So grocery shopping, water, because you don't want to drink tap water. Assume what do you think's fair for a normal person living in New York City to eat? $300 a week?
I guess that's.
I mean that includes toiletries, everything. Basically, pay $300 pays for all your toiletries and expenses like food, water, toothpaste, all that stuff. So now 300 times 4, that's $1,200. So now that leaves you with $260. Now remember, everyone wants a cell phone. $100 a month for a cell phone. Now you're down to $160. So $160, what am I missing on top of that, right? Like, it's nothing. And the government was giving you $800. I think I think people were getting like $600 or $700 for doing nothing.
Yeah, 600.
600 for doing nothing. And so why would I work 40 hours to basically have nothing after my life? Like, so I'm working for 40 hours a week to pay for everything. So, and I'm going to get $600 free so I can kind of just live my life there, maybe get a cash job on the side, see if someone wants to pay me cash, make a little bit extra money.
Right.
I mean, and this is bullshit math I'm doing. Like, I'm sure the taxes are more because remember, when you're in New York City, you get fucked 3 ways. You get fucked with federal, you get fucked with state, and you get fucked with the city tax.
Yep. Yeah, the municipal tax is super high there. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, and this is sort of the irony of just the capitalists in general. And I am kind of loath to use that term because it sort of sounds incendiary, but I'm talking in a larger class. You've got the Goldman Sachs guys out there saying, "Oh, this is bullshit." You got the likes of Leon Cooperman. This is bullshit. He's a fucking multi-millionaire who has probably sat on his ass for the last 50 years and hasn't done much of jack shit. And he sits there and says, "Oh, this is bullshit. Everybody's getting their free money from the government." And then they'll turn around and say, "Well, capitalism is the only system of innovation that works for humanity." And it's like, well, okay, but if the whole idea is that capitalism is supposed to be the most enticing type of society, then why can't capitalism beat the government? Why can't capitalism innovate to make coming to work and working for people more enticing than not?
But see, that Goldman Sachs schmuck is the guy who's afraid that this person making $15 an hour, if they're all smart enough to realize that, you know what, we need to rise up and fight a little bit more. He's the one that's putting the money in the politician's pocket to make sure that doesn't happen. And if it means causing fear, that's what they're going to do.
Well, listen, that's why I took a little bit harder left of a turn than I had taken previously before the pandemic, because I really saw, one of the things one of the big socialist arguments before the pandemic that I always saw that I guess I just always kind of dismissed it, was that labor is more important than the ruling class or the managerial class, or how essentially they're saying the idea that the workforce has ultimately more power and more people than the upper echelons. And dude, it really is true. The pandemic totally demonstrated that there's so much more labor there. The labor force is way larger than the top tier who sort of organize it. So if the labor force were to revolt, or even just, sort of collectivize and start making demands as a group about, the standards that they want met, they ultimately have way more power to do that than the people, quote unquote, in charge do to stop them. You can't have anything without the labor to make it, without the labor to produce it. So ultimately, the labor force really does have the power in this country or any country. And it's just a matter of letting go of this individualist philosophy that's really prevalent in this country, where it's like everybody can make it. You gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Do you know, by the way, that pull yourself up by your bootstraps is a deliberately nonsensical phrase? You physically cannot pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I never even thought about it, but it's literally, it's one of those phrases that is a joke, and it's mocking the idea of somebody who would say something like that. And so now you've got people out here who are unironically, without realizing it, saying that to people and thinking that, that's an actual thing when it's not. You physically, you can't, and it's a joke phrase. So you have to let go of this sort of individualist mentality. It's like, all right, well, I'm the millionaire in this room. I just haven't hit my $1 million yet. And you got to realize, like, working together is ultimately way more effective than not, and just saying, oh, well, all these people suck, and I'm in the same shitty position as them, but it's all right because I know that I'm gonna grind my way out of it.
I think eliminating the idea of the mindset of become a billionaire is what needs to happen, really. I think everyone needs to be taught that it's, listen, I like money and I do like expensive things, but I think training someone to say, hey, you can be a billionaire is what needs to stop. I think striving to be 100,000-aire or a comfortable millionaire is okay. I mean, listen, if somebody was working their balls off and they're making $1 million, $2 million a year, that is awesome. And if that allows that person who's making $1 million a year to work for a company that the person who's making minimum 100 grand a year, I think that is a fair trade-off rather than that. Because whether I make $2 million or $20 million a year, I really don't know what I'm really going to do significantly different except be an asshole and buy a yacht. I mean, first off, really in my head, I never really want a boat. I really don't need a boat. If anything, if I got a boat, it's like, I don't know. I can't even imagine having a boat, right? I guess if I had the opportunity to have a boat, that'd be cool. But if I make $2 million a year, going to 20 million is just, what am I going to be, an asshole and get a really big boat?
Yeah. At a certain point, it's like, geez, I don't need a bigger boat.
I mean, it's cool enough to just have a boat. I don't like many people. So it's one of those things like, who am I really trying to impress with a really big boat? Except, hey, I got a big boat. I mean, I get having a nice big house because you're living there and you're there most of your time. I can argue saying that, but I mean, a house that's the size of a small island, I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, a house that you need a live-in staff to maintain because it's so big.
But see, that staff, at least you're giving,
to me.
I mean, at least you're giving people jobs. What about a house that's like so big, not to the point where you don't need a living staff, but it's big enough where it's just like you're only in a quarter of the house?
Well, I would be willing to assert that anybody who has a live-in staff dedicated to the upkeep of their house is probably not paying them to measure it to the work that they do.
Well, Arnold Schwarzenegger was.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a tip. I would like to see pay stubs. That's all I'm saying, because I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that the wages for that kind of a job, for somebody who's that rich, right? Who's and that's the other thing is, that's the other myth of capitalism is that it's the job creators who are so benevolent in that they offer people jobs. And it's like, no, the job creators need people to do the job in order for them to create the product, right? Their vision only works when they've got a team of people making it work. So the people who, and I'm not saying the job creators aren't important, right? But they're at least equally as important as the people who are doing the job, who are performing the work to produce whatever it is that the creator wanted in the first place. So there needs to be more of an equal footing there, I think.
100%. And on Labor Day this year, that is exactly what workers need to not put this conversation in the box. This is a conversation that I actually don't think turns into arguments. And if somebody's arguing against higher wages for people who are trying to live, I feel that an argument is necessary. And I feel that if there is an argument, it's between employee and employer, and employee trying to take a stand as to why I should be paid more. I think at the end of the day, if you compensate somebody to listen, you can't overpay someone either, but there's a value to every single job. Because I'm going to use school as an example. Everyone looks down at the janitor, right? But you know what? The janitor is actually probably more important than the fucking art teacher. Sorry, art teachers, but that janitor is cleaning everything up. If a child pukes, and I'm sure more than enough children puke in classrooms, you don't see the art teacher going over there with the paintbrush and starting to clean it up. No, the janitor okay? The janitor cleans it up. He or she, they come in and make sure the school, it's clean. It's a very important role, because if that janitor didn't come in, that means there's puke on the floor. That means the teacher's going to have to do it. And then you're going to hear more complaining from the teachers because they have to clean up children's puke. They're going to have to mop the classroom because it gets muddy. So that's a super important job. And if they're only getting $15 an hour, I mean, hell, if they're getting $20 an hour, I don't think that's enough. I feel that's a job that if they wanted $75,000 a year to do it, and I think they deserve it. A janitor deserves the money that they make. It's like a garbage man. People always look down on garbage men and garbage women. That is another job that is, honestly, it's necessary. Now, they shouldn't be paid $1 million a year, but they should be compensated very well, because, Tom, I'll tell you, I don't want to pick up garbage every day.
No, I have toyed with the idea of like, oh, well, I could just bring my own garbage to the dump instead of getting a collection company to come and take my garbage to the dump. And I always end up saying like, no, you know what? It's not something I want to deal with. Like, I'd rather pay somebody to deal with it. And yeah, I think it's an essential function of society that, you have people like janitors, like garbage men. These roles are essential in society. And, it's time that we stopped looking at people in roles that we consider, quote unquote, beneath us or something like, not that I would do that, but, just in general, it's time to stop looking at jobs as like lower class jobs or stupid jobs or meaningless jobs, and it's time to realize that like a lot of these jobs that we've taken for granted, that people get underpaid and exploited at them, are essential to the function of our society. And we need to take them a little more seriously. The job creators need to offer more money to staff these positions if they don't want people to just sit at home and let the government pay them.
And it also goes to like baristas and fast food servers and all that stuff, because they're the ones that are really getting away with the minimum wage stuff. And that's where they're like, well, all they're doing is this. Well, why don't I actually think the books, we should be more open to seeing the books of certain things if they want to pay such a low wage. I mean, I know that'll never fucking happen, but like Dunkin' Donuts wants to pay $13 an hour here in Pennsylvania. And again, I did the math for a full-time, I mean, $13 an hour, $27.40 a year divided by 12. I mean, that's $2,200 a month, $2,253 a month. I mean, how is somebody supposed to live off $2,253 a month? And then they're going to say, well, they're just serving coffee. Well, I'd like to see your books. How much are you pocketing by owning this establishment that you don't even show up to? So like if somebody has a Dunkin' Donuts and they're making $300,000 a year for just owning a Dunkin' Donuts, in my opinion, they shouldn't be making $300,000 a year just for owning a Dunkin' Donuts and letting it run. I mean, that's just my opinion. It's, yes, you took the risk, you divvied up the money to open up the Dunkin' Donuts. That's great. You're trying to get your return back. But if they're netting $300,000 a year, and then and then obviously they're paying their taxes on it, but for doing nothing and making $300,000 a year, I think it would be better to pay the employees $20 an hour. So at least you're not worried about all the constant, turnovers, and then making $150 for doing nothing. Yeah. I mean, you mean to tell me that the managers that you hire aren't doing like the P&Ls and all that stuff? I mean, there is no way that the owner is doing all the financials. Isn't the point of a manager to manage the hours, manage the money that comes in, manage the money that goes out, manage the hours and the staff availability? So as an absentee owner, I think absentee owners who are really benefiting off their company they need to relook at how much they're making and what they're putting forth. Because if all they're doing is bitching and complaining about how, oh, I made 20,000 last month and I'm only making 18,000 this month. Well, you weren't even around. They need to reevaluate what their expectations are.
Right.
Because opening up a McDonald's, opening up a Dunkin' Donuts or a KFC / Taco Bell, it shouldn't just be all, bells and whistles. Like, if you're not putting any work into it and it's all your employees doing it for you, I think those are the people who need to take a stand, really. And again, it's like, all right, well, this means that everyone's going to get the automated burger flippers. Well, why isn't anybody doing that yet? Because they don't want to spend the fucking money. Because they realize that shit is super expensive. And I'm sure every time it breaks, it causes a lot of stress and hassle. Because if one breaks, then the timing I feel like in the fast food world, it is going to be very tough to automate it. I'd like to see them actually do it. Go ahead and invest the hundreds of thousands of dollars up front and do it, and see how fast people actually stop getting food from you.
Yeah, I definitely think the idea of automation in the fast food world is just a boogeyman. And again, those jobs are the same thing. They are essential to the function of society. I mean, especially if you get another lockdown, all the local restaurants are going to close, right? I mean, like, obviously, if they don't support your local restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. But, a lot of the local businesses were forced to close during the lockdown, and all the corporations stayed open. And we talked about this on another episode. People at these corporations are not paid enough. They're just simply not paid enough for them to risk their health and safety to go out there and deal with the public. Why would they want to do that instead of sitting home safely and not having to deal with the public, not having to deal with the stress of an anxious public that is in the midst of a pandemic, and risk their own safety and health for a smaller paycheck than what they would get for staying at home? You can't say that jobs like that aren't essential, because during a lockdown, they were pretty much your only options. You ate at McDonald's or you cooked at home.
So that is not a conversation to put in the box, but politics is something that can go in the box, because you don't want to argue about that. Vaccination, probably throw it in the box. Pro-life, pro-choice, one of the reasons why we have decided to box part 1 initially, that is definitely a conversation to go in the box.
I think we should mention, though, and because I thought it was a really good point that you brought up on the episode, without getting into the nuance or the mechanics of the discussion that we had. And for the record, we were both in agreement on that argument. I do think a good point that you brought up was that if you're a man, you should really take a moment to consider why you have an opinion on the pro-choice versus pro-life argument at all. And you should really maybe just instead kind of shut the fuck up.
You know what, Tommy? I think you are 100% right. You know what we should do? And maybe we'll add this towards the end of our first season, like the end of the first half of the first season. Who the fuck knows how many episodes we're actually going to be doing in the first season? maybe we'll chop up the box that we put in the box, and we can maybe take out that discussion and add it as a bonus to our box.
Yeah, bonus box.
Bonus box.
It's a little extra box inside the box.
I think that would be a pretty cool idea, listeners. So we will do that for you.
I think that'll be fun. Now, here's a question for you, Christopher. Did we even get into the idea of did we ever actually explain from front to back what the box is? Like, the concept of the box? Did we ever actually define it? I don't think we did.
I guess we kind of mentioned it. So as we conclude this episode, because again, we went back in time and we redid this whole thing. So why don't we end it with the concept of the box, since a lot of people already have an idea of what the box is?
I'm not the person to describe this. I'm a theories guy. I'm not a definitions guy.
The whole purpose of the box is basically just to keep a healthy relationship with the person that you have that box with. And ultimately, the purpose of the box is so that there's no hate, no arguments where there's relationships breaking up, friendships ending, family members going on a non-speaking thing for the rest of their life. I mean, the whole purpose of this box is so that we can stay civil.
Right. Facilitate togetherness, because we all have a lot more things in common than we don't. To quote the great philanthropist Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, well, hopefully he'll go in a box soon.
Yeah. I mean, that's the equivalent of like the Antichrist reading scripture, right? I mean, like, hey, or a broken clock, let's say. Even though I think he's a deplorable and reprehensible human being, I do agree with that. I think ultimately we all do have a lot more things in common than we don't. And we shouldn't let our opinions, even if they are strong, and even if the debate surrounding them right now in current social discussion is contentious, I don't think we should let it permeate the boundaries of our relationships. I think if those things happen, our interpersonal relationships, meaning like, our friendships, family, etc. I think if those things happen, the responsible and adult thing to do is for both of you to acknowledge it, take a step back, and truly examine whether or not this is something that is so integral to your personality, so fundamental to you that it's worth dissolving this friendship, this family relationship, etc. over. And if it's not, then put it in the box.
So, listeners, I am going to cut us off because this box part 1 is going on a little over an hour, but the box part 2 was relatively short. So we want to thank you for understanding why we released part 2 before part 1 and why we had to go back to the past. And we are back. The hiatus is over, and get ready for a fun couple of weeks, because our next episode coming up is going to be a very special treat.
Yes. I don't know. We got a little heavy these past 2 episodes. Are we gonna lighten it up next episode, or are we really gonna?
We're gonna definitely lighten
put
it
our
up
listeners on the edge.
No, we're gonna lighten it up and kind of give them a Cosby effect type podcast next week, I think.
I'm certainly on board with that, and I think we could all use a little levity in the weeks coming, because things are only going to get weirder.
That they are. So, listeners, happy Labor Day. You deserve a vacation. Fight for that money. This is your year.
Your year. Own it.
Your year. All right. So long, listeners.